Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to GeoVax's channel, a clinical stage biotechnology company developing novel therapies and vaccines for cancers and many of the world's most threatening infectious diseases. Joining us to discuss, give us a high-level overview of the company, a little bit of its history, and some milestones that investors can look forward to. We have David, the Chief Executive Officer. Welcome, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Kyle.
A pleasure to get you on. So I want to dive right into this. Just for newer investors, your pipeline is pretty extensive, targeting everything from COVID, solid tumors to Ebola and Zika. Do you want to just give us an idea, an introduction, maybe like a brief elevator pitch to exactly what's going on here?
Absolutely, and thanks for asking. I'll focus on what is most critical, and that is that GeoVax is a clinical stage company developing vaccines and immunotherapies, addressing some of the most critically unmet medical needs worldwide. We have 2 products in phase 2 clinical trials addressing such critically important needs. We have upcoming near-term milestones within the next 12 months, which we'll talk about. We're currently covered by 4 equity research analysts, all with buy recommendations at a price target, 12-month price target of $6 per share. We're funded into 2024 with no debt. We have proven leadership that has transformed other companies, and we're an ideal candidate for acquisition or partnering.
Wow, I think you you gave us a lot of information there. I really appreciate that. That was very thorough, a lot more than I'm used to hearing. And I mean, your experience is pretty extensive, right? You've done over $5 billion in enterprise growth and led the approval of over 10 NDAs. Do you want to give a little bit of history of what led up to that aha moment for you? How did you get involved with GeoVax?
Sure. I have over 40 years of experience in the industry. Like many people, started out in the big pharma world. So I had the opportunity of being trained and forgiven by many great mentors along the way. I started with what was then Abbott Laboratories. It was not separate from AbbVie. It was all an integrated corporation. I ended up spending time at Bristol Myers, which became Bristol Myers Squibb. That's when I moved into a general management position and had the opportunity to lead a very small division that was doing about $20 million in branded generic sales. I was told, this is your opportunity. If you could move the needle, have the job again for another year. So I was there for 5 years. We took it from 20 million to $250 million in sales. Still not a big number in the context, but in that standpoint, it was very significant growth. I went from there to Wyeth, where I ended up eventually running all U.S. pharmaceuticals and vaccines. That was a $4 billion corporation, launching products in many different therapeutic areas. Really a terrific experience for myself. Following that, I went to a company as a CEO. I was wanting to develop, my skills more broadly, more deeply and all, and that was a great experience. That, in fact, was the opportunity where we added over $2 billion in 5 years in incremental enterprise value. Took a business that was worth $100 million in enterprise value, had $100 million in sales when I went into that opportunity, worked with some tremendous team members, staff members, and 5 years later, it was valued at $2.5 billion, doing $550 million in sales, and obviously doing it very well. I then went to NASDAQ because I wanted to sort of run a public company, and that was the opportunity where I went into a company that had lost 90% of its value in the previous year. I figured it was all upside. What could I lose from that standpoint? And so it was a great experience. We fully transformed that company, sold off the original business, and in 6 years, we took it from $80 million in sales and $100 million, or not quite 100 million, I should say, in market value. 6 years later, we sold it for $1.5 billion, all cash transaction to Millipore Corporation. And then following that, frankly, I took a little bit of time off, 30 days, and then I moved into private equity, something I'd never worked in before, and co-invested and became more of an entrepreneur. And that was almost 20 years ago. And I started working in that new arena, which I found was very interesting. Have moved back in at times to assignments and opportunities in NASDAQ, have founded various companies. Along the way, I was introduced to GeoVax, first as an investor and then as a board member. So I knew some of the founders, and I have an affinity and interest for vaccines. So I was very interested in it. I became involved, became the chairman of the board, and 2011, but still I was doing full time on other types of opportunities. But I was very interested in the concept. 2014 sort of guided the shift in strategy to a more broader strategy of applying the technology that GeoVax had underway. 2018, I had the opportunity to step into the company full time as the chairman, president, CEO. The company at that time was dealing with a very toxic capital situation. My goal, frankly, was to clean up the capital structure, and then working with the CFO, he and I had put together a plan that once we cleaned it up, we were going to move it forward and try to accelerate the pace. 3 years later, or 2 years later, I should say, in 2020, actually during the height of the pandemic of COVID-19, we took advantage of that. We were able to clean up the capital structure, rid ourselves of a very toxic situation, successfully uplist on NASDAQ, and raise some initial money. In 2021, we in-licensed the two clinical stage products that we now have. One was a next generation COVID-19 vaccine. The other was a technology with a product in phase 2 for advanced head and neck cancer, so an oncology area, which were the two areas we were very interested in, and we were off to the races. And since then, we have moved the company forward. We now have two products, as I mentioned, in phase 2 clinical trials. One is a next generation COVID-19 vaccine. We now have 3 phase 2 clinical trials underway with that product. We're in very involved discussions with the U.S. government under the White House initiative, Project NextGen. The other program we have is a product called Gedeptin, which is a targeted therapy for treating advanced head and neck cancers. It's currently completing its first stage of a phase 2 and being fully funded by the U.S. FDA under the Orphan Drugs Clinical Trials Program. So we're off to the races, and you're right, we've developed other products, we have other initiatives, but make no mistake, our focus is on moving these clinical stage products to reporting data milestones. And for me, it's been a great career. I'm not a scientist by training, actually a mathematician by education and training, but I moved into the business side. I very much enjoy working with highly motivated, very smart teams. And I've had the pleasure of like you mentioned, overseeing over 15 acquisitions and divestitures during my time, over $2.5 billion, I should say, in financial transactions, and over $5 billion, I should say, in incremental enterprise growth. So it's a really good, exciting time. I feel very excited and very positive about the outlook for GeoVax. So I hope I've given you some insight to myself and also to the company.
On that note, when we come back, I want to talk more in depth about the milestones and some of those key, points that'll come up within these trials. But I'll pass the question off to the viewers. We'd love to know what you think in that comment section below, and definitely consider subscribing, because as that news hits the wire, of course, we're going to continue to update you here. But on that, we look forward to catching you in the next one.